Hello. Today we're going to look at the relationship between 911 and the Declaration of Independence. I know that sounds like a topic that you look forward to every day, but yes, it is true. Now, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of an attack on the United States by Muslim extremists, and it was done on 9/11. September the 11th of 2001. Now, what is the significance of 9/11? A lot of people will say in America, we have 911, emergency. Okay, well, that's good. I mean, that's a good reason. But from a historical viewpoint and an American history viewpoint, there could be another possibility. In Jewish reckoning, the new day began at sunset. And on September the 11th of 3 BC, a very significant event in the history of the world took place. We know from biblical research and history and also astronomy that sunset on that day was at 6 p.m. I worked with the biblical research team that did the bulk of the research for that using previous works of history as well as modern, in conjunction with the University of California, Berkeley astronomy department. They charted the skies and the stars and the constellations so that they could see exactly what occurred on that leading up to that event. What was the star that the Magi saw that impelled them to go to Jerusalem to announce the birth of the king and to pay homage to that king? Well, why were the Magi looking for something like that when nobody in Jerusalem noticed it? We know that by the fact that there's no record of the shepherds in the field noticing anything in the heavens except the angels that showed up miraculously and told them that a child was born and he's in a manger. You better hurry up and get down there because a swaddled baby is for a limited amount of time. And that baby was the birth of the Savior, the Christ, the Messiah, which they gladly ran down there and did. But it was Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Babylon that trained the Magi about Judaism and the prophecies of the Messiah and what to look for in the stars. So when they recognized these celestial events, they traveled to Jerusalem and told King Herod that they were there to pay tribute to the newborn king. And Herod, just as any good king would do, said, when you find that guy, let me know. I'd love to go meet him myself. And by the way, when did you say that star first occurred? So there's our next hint that they weren't paying attention to what was going on. And it wasn't some spectacular big nova explosion or a meteor or a comet or any of those things. It was just a normal transition and conjunctions of the stars, the planets, and the you would call them the constellations in the sky. If you want to know the details on that, there's a book out there called Jesus Christ, Our Promised Seed, and it covers all of that in there in very, very minute detail. Very, very great work. Anyway, after I graduated from college, I was invited to work with that team that put that type of research together. That's where I learned how to do studies. My area of study was World History and Biblical History, and the Gospels, which is a historical book of the Bible. So with that in mind, we know that September the 11th of 3 BC was the birth date of the Savior. So where's this crazy guy coming up with this idea that there's some relation between 9/11 and the Declaration of Independence? Well, let's go look and see what the founders said about it. How about it? Let's go. On the 4th of July of 1837, John Quincy Adams was invited to the town of Newburyport, Massachusetts for the 4th of July celebration for that year. The significance of Newburyport was this is where George Whitefield, they pronounced it Whitefield, was buried. They were doing this at his tomb. But also Whitefield came over from England, and he was an itinerant preacher. He would preach about 500 sermons a year. Yes, that's more than one a day. And his message was one of unity. He said he got the revelation to come over here and preach the gospel and make the then 13 colonies one nation under God. He said God gave him the revelation to go do that. Well, that was called the First Great Awakening in America, and it led to the American Revolution. But on this occasion, John Quincy Adams was the last living founding father. Charles Carroll had died in 1832. He was the oldest living survivor of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And the year previous to this one, in 1836, was when James Madison died. So John Quincy Adams never signed either one of those documents, yet he was still one of the most influential founding fathers of that era. He began his first service at 8 years old in the militia in 1775. He would regularly work with the Quincy, Massachusetts militia company in musket drills. He never saw action, but he still drilled with them and was very proficient with his musket at 8 years old. At 12, he was the secretary to the, we would call it ambassador to England for the American colonies during the war. And it was his father, John Adams, but he was John Adams' personal secretary. At 14 years old, he was the personal secretary for the ambassador to Russia. And the reason they chose him for that position at age 14 was because he had mastered the Russian language enough to where he could be the translator between the English and the Russians, using French as the common language. John Quincy Adams was also one of the most longest serving and prolific members of the American government in our history. He served for well over 50 years. He was president. He was a senator. He was House of Representatives after the presidency for a number of years. He was a Supreme Court attorney, where he was allowed to argue before the Supreme Court. One of his most famous cases was the Amistad case about a slave ship. Made movies about that one. And he was also unanimously chosen for a seat on the Supreme Court, which he refused so that he could continue his work in the House of Representatives to fight slavery. So with that in mind, this gentleman here was the last of an era. They invited him to come speak on this occasion because he, of all people, knew exactly why and how the Declaration of Independence and that whole founding era of people pulled it off. So, in this oration, he tells us how and why they did what they did. Why is it, friends and fellow citizens, that you are here assembled? Why is it that entering upon the 62nd year of our national existence, let's go back here real quick, get a better view. Why is it that entering upon the 62nd year of our national existence, you have honored with an invitation to address you from this place, a fellow citizen of a former age, bearing in the records of his memory, eyewitness account, the warm and vivid affections which attached him at the distance of a full half century to your town, to your forefathers, then the cherished associates of his useful days. Why is it that next to the birthday of the Savior of the world, your most joyous and most venerated festival returns on this day? And why is it that among the swarming myriads of our population, thousands and tens of thousands among us, abstaining under the dictate of religious principle from the commemoration of that birthday of him who brought life and immortality to light, yet unite with all their brethren of this community year after year in celebrating this, the birthday of the nation? Is it not that in the chain of human events, the birthday of the nation is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior? Now, let me read that again so you'll make sure that you get it and that I didn't make this up. Is it not that in the chain of human events, the birthday of the nation, the United States, is indissolubly linked with the birthday of the Savior? That it forms a leading event in the progress of the gospel dispensation? Is it not that the Declaration of Independence first organized the social compact on the foundation of the Redeemer's mission on earth, upon earth? That it laid the cornerstone of human government upon the first precepts of Christianity and gave to the world the first irrevocable pledge of the fulfillment of the prophecies announced directly from heaven at the birth of the Savior and predicted by the greatest of the Hebrew prophets 600 years before. Well, there you go. The Declaration of Independence is indissolubly linked with the birth of Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, the only begotten Son of God, and that they lay the cornerstone of our government upon the first precepts of Christianity. And they also said that gave to the world the first irrevocable pledge of the fulfillment of the prophecies announced directly from heaven at the birth of the Savior. At the birth of the Savior, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. At the end of his ministry, Jesus Christ gave a commission to his apostles and disciples that they were to begin at Jerusalem and in Judea and in Samaria and then go to the uttermost parts of the earth. making disciples of all the nations, teaching them everything that I have taught you. So it says that we are doing our part as a leader in the gospel dispensation or administration. This time in biblical history is the Christian era. And we're the leading force in that they were saying that they had taken Christianity, made it the foundation of their founding documents in every part of their society. If you want more detail about all of that and how they did that, I'm not going to get into that today. But the Declaration of Independence does say that our rights as American citizens are endowed by the Creator himself, and that our rights are contained in the laws of nature and nature's God. Literally, that legal phrase, the laws of nature and nature's God, briefly defined, is no human law is valid if it contradicts what is plainly written in the scriptures of the Old and New Testaments of the Holy Bible. Any human law that contradicts these is void and must be disobeyed. So with that in mind, 9/11 is the birth of the Savior. And 9/11, September the 11th, is indissolubly linked to the Declaration of Independence. So hopefully you learned something there. If you want to know more detail about this, get my book, In God We Trusted, the U.S. Constitution and the Restoration of America. I go through that in minute detail. Don't want to get into all that today because this is just a little YouTube video commemorating September the 11th and what it truly means to America. And you have to answer the question for yourself. Did those religious fanatics attack us on that day because of this? You decide. Anyway, God bless. You're the best. And I look forward to you next time when we get into some more of the wonderful truths of the founding of our country. So for now, God bless and see you next time.